All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll call this meeting of the full Committee for Ways and Means to order. 2 o'clock meeting. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, members of the committee. Thank you all for being here and getting across the street safely. We're going to get right into at least 3 bills. First on our calendar today, Chair recognizes the Speaker of the House. Where is he? Right there. Representative Glenn Richardson, if you would. House Resolution 1246, House Bill 979, and Senate Resolution 796 in whatever order you deem best, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If it's okay with you, I think what I don't believe there's been any issue quite as vetted as the subject of tax reform over the last year, and I believe we've had more than a few hours worth of hearings and testimonies on this. Before the full committee, I know that you've been involved in the subcommittee, and I've spent quite a bit of time in the subcommittee myself, answering questions, dispelling rumors, and frankly setting forth what this tax reform proposal is about. So here's what I would prefer to do. I would like to give you a broad brush of all 3 bills without trying to go through them section by section. And I'd just like to tell you what this really does. So anything that anybody's told you other than what I'm telling you is old information or old news. This proposal is designed to slowly start easing the difficulties of property taxes on our citizens by broadening the tax base for sales taxes and consumption, period. That's all it does, is it slowly turns away, and I'm going to list the things it does. The first thing it does is it ends the tag tax or the birthday tax. It will eliminate all taxes on all personal autos. Local governments will still get the exact same amount of money. They'll still set the millage rate. They'll still multiply it times the value. They'll still generate a bill, and they'll get exactly what they would have gotten as if the taxpayer had paid it. The only difference is there'll be a credit, just like we do on the homeowner tax relief grant. The state will issue a check to the local governments to be dispersed as they would normally disperse it if the taxpayer paid it, but the taxpayer would not pay any taxes on their birthday. This takes effect January 1st, 2009. This bill, these resolutions in this bill, eliminates all school taxes on all homesteaded properties in Georgia. Nearly 2 million Georgians, when this is implemented, if they vote for it in the referendum, will see their tax bills either cut in half or more. Because what will happen is, again, just as with the property tax on autos, local jurisdictions will set the millage rate, determine how much money they need within the confines of what we've limited them to. The bill will be generated. A credit for the exact amount of the school tax will be placed on the bill. The state will write the check for the school tax portion. The school will get every penny they would have gotten as if the taxpayer paid it, but the homeowner will not have to pay the school tax. Number 3, we will freeze all values of all property in Georgia at 2008 values. All property will be frozen at its 2008 value. Residential property will be allowed to increase in value as long as there's ownership with the same person, not more than 2% per year, and non-residential property not more than 3% per year unless there's an improvement or a sale of the property. We will cap the millage rate of all local governments at the 2008 amount of revenue they generated plus an inflation rate equal to the governmental inflation rate. Unless they say they need more, pass a resolution and put it on the ballot and the voters approve a tax increase for that particular district. 5, we will eliminate the state portion of the property tax. The $0.25 of the state tax will be eliminated. In order to do all of this, we need to have additional revenue to replace it. Even though this overall proposal results in a net tax cut of $422 million. To generate the new revenue, we will reimpose the tax on groceries at 4% effective January 1st, 2009. Effective January 1st, 2009, there will be a 4% state sales tax on lottery. And for the first time, after a 13-month implementation period, we will implement a tax on personal services at the state rate of 4%. Again, the tax will be on personal services, not business to business. And it, in addition thereto, will not include medical services, child care, education, or residential construction. Next, there will be a $20 tag fee to take care of tagging the vehicle, $10 of which shall be designated as trauma care. So combined within this package of this tax reform, as we take taxes off of autos, we're going to take $10 and add it on as a fee for trauma care. And last but not least, both of the resolutions, the House and the Senate resolution, are subject to the voter approval of the voters of this state in November of 2008. And so if what you're looking for is whether or not the people of this state want this, they'll ultimately be the ones to decide this matter. In this entire debate over taxes, all I've heard over and over is we want local control, local control, local control. Well, here's your local control. It puts it on a ballot and lets the citizens of this state that elect you, me, mayors, commissioners, school board members, it lets them decide. And then it gives them parameters within which they can raise taxes so that there's not any backdoor or front door tax increase in Georgia, unless the local control of the citizens that elect those people say they want it. Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to answer any questions this body has, but that, in summary, is what this bill and these two resolutions do. I submit them for your consideration and ask that you consider due pass and send them to the Rules Committee for consideration by the entire House of Representatives.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you yield to questions if there
Yes,
are
sir.
any from members?
If that's the preference of the
Do
chair, that's what I'll
members of
do.
the committee have any questions? Number 15, is that Representative Graves?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The fiscal note that we received a few meetings ago references a different LC number than what we have here, I believe. What changes were made that, I guess, in this current version that we have, I guess it was adopted yesterday, in relation to the fiscal note that we received dated February 14th?
I believe these were the cleanup changes from the subcommittee meeting. Is that correct? The only change that I really know of is that the LC number that the fiscal note was written on was the one presented at subcommittee whenever we had that 3-hour hearing. As a result of that hearing, we made changes that we went through yesterday in the subcommittee. So there is no variation of other than what the committee wanted in the subcommittee.
If I might continue.
You may.
Well, I guess my question is, I don't know that the committee made any changes yesterday. That it was a substitute that was presented to the committee.
Well, that's how that works, Representative. When we present a substitute and the committee votes on it, that's what that's called.
I understand that. Was it mentioned in the committee that the trauma tax would be on all vehicles?
It was.
And was that considered in this old version of the fiscal note?
I think that when it was originally drafted, that, and I believe a representative called that, the add-on, the $20 fee was for all personal vehicles, and it was intended to be on all vehicles. So I doubt if that is reflected in these numbers. It would probably change that number by whatever the difference is in the total vehicles in this state minus the personal vehicles.
Okay, but we don't know what that number is, I guess.
If you tell me how many vehicles are in the state minus the personal vehicles, and we'll multiply that times 20, and you'll know the answer.
If I might continue.
Yes.
The portion of the bill that deals with the, I guess it's the cable companies that have franchise fees now. Do those companies currently charge a state sales tax?
They charge what's called a franchise fee that's applicable in every jurisdiction that assesses it up to 5%. That is tantamount to a service tax. And so those people who currently have cable today are paying the franchise fee, which is a pass-through to local governments that we believe is the same as a service tax.
But currently they do not charge a state sales tax.
My belief is that they don't, not that I'm aware of.
And the reason I ask is that I guess in the fiscal note, again, back to it, in Section 2-3, it refers to about a $45 million tax cut. But if we're not currently charging that tax, I'm trying to figure out how that's
franchise is the. Well, here's what happens if you buy television services from a cable provider today. You pay a franchise fee. That franchise fee is a pass-through straight to the government. What I believe is Section 1-3 of the bill, it may be 1-4, does is it provides a credit to the extent you already pay a fee. So it shows up as a credit because you're paying it now, and the intentions is not to charge two different service taxes on a multimedia presentation. You can say that it's a credit, or you can say we're not charging it, but it shows up in the revenue somewhere. But when they drew the fiscal note, they preferred to show that as a credit. It will be a dollar-for-dollar credit on every cable subscriber's bill to the extent they pay franchise fees. Now then, to translate that to money, if you have a $100 cable bill and you're paying $3 in franchise fees and the tax is $4, you'd get a credit for $3. So that you'd still be paying $4 total, but you would get a credit for the franchise fee that's paid to the local government.
So does that mean there will be a sales tax added to the cable bill as well as a credit on the cable bill? I guess that's my question. If you don't charge a sales tax, I'm not sure how you get a credit.
Yes, it is a personal service, is a service for which they will pay a fee, but you'll get a credit for the franchise fee. So that you're not paying it twice was the logic behind that.
Okay, and then if I could just ask one more, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Yeah, I've got others here, so if you would wrap it up if you can.
I will. Early in the debate, there was a lot of discussion about losing the tax deduction on federal income tax and things like that. And there was a number used, and I don't remember the number, and I remember you spoke to it many times about it really only amounts to a dollar amount, a percentage of whatever your property tax was. And I don't remember, was that like 20% or?
It's different for everybody. It depends on whether you first of all have to reach, as you know, you have to be able to itemize. That is a very small segment of all filers. Is your question, how much is the value of that?
Yeah, and the only reason I ask is because we do hear that a little bit, and I was trying to remember your argument against it was, well, look, it only amounts to an average of 20% or 25% of whatever that was. And
I don't know that we ever were able to quantify it that clearly, but the deduction is only valued to the extent that you're able to claim. It's not a credit. So even if you itemize, you would only get whatever the amount you paid in property taxes as a deduction, which would correlate to your specific level. If you're at 30%, then it couldn't be more than 30%. But there's also other things that make that a much more complicated calculation, and that's the alternative minimum tax and the phase-out of deductions at 3% of adjusted gross income. Both of those come into play with higher wage earners when you get above about $70,000 a year per family income, and you start to lose the value of those deductions, so that a higher income earners' deductions are not as valuable as a person at a lower income. I don't know what those are representative of. Everybody is a little bit different, but you will be you'll still be paying some property taxes, so this isn't a complete elimination. When we first proposed this, as you know, in its purest form, we intended to eliminate all property taxes, and that was when people had that conversation. This is only the school tax component, and it's only the school tax component for homesteads. It's not all residential, which is what we're capping at 2%, all residential. Thank you. Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman.
Number 12, is that Representative Martin?
Yes, sir.
You recognize, sir, for question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, if you yield for a question.
Certainly.
I understand, and you know, I've had some pause with the local control issue. How do I answer it to, you know, my county and my city when perhaps Fulton County or folks up in District 47 might vote against this, but the rest of the state carries them into a situation where they find themselves in a different situation? I was asked about that at a district meeting this weekend with some people that have been active in politics up there quite a while.
The same way we do any other statewide referendum. The same way we do if a referendum passes 90% in one county and fails in another, that county is bound by the referendum. That's just our system of governance.
Yes, sir. And in due respect, I understand that, but how do I tell them that gives them more local control than they have today?
Well, look, sometimes people try to use the words local control, unquote, for the purpose of setting forth an argument that's sometimes a little specious. It has no factual background. And that's become a buzzword, apparently, in this subject. People like to say that, oh, it will take away local control. When you press them and ask them what part of the control locally is taken away, I invite you to give me that list, because there's not a single thing that's going to be taken away except the indiscriminate ability to raise taxes without voter approval. That will be taken away. There will no longer be an ability to say we need more money, therefore we'll raise the millage rate. There'll have to be this statement: we need more money. We'll have to ask the voters if they want to pay for this or if we're supposed to cut, period. Nothing else changes. The amount of money they receive is exactly what they would have received as if the taxpayer had written the whole bill. Because what we're essentially doing is we're putting the state in the role, and for the first time in the history of the state is going to guarantee the payment of the school tax part of homesteads in Georgia. And they don't have that today.
If I could have one brief follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
You may.
You say, Mr. Speaker, that we were going to guarantee that. That guarantee is put in place by constitutional amendment or statute?
By constitutional mandate. We're guaranteeing the payment of the school tax component of the homesteads. We the state.
And again, I wasn't at the subcommittee, and we just got these three bills, or three measures, or resolutions and bills today. But and give you a chance to clear this up, because you said you've been told a lot of things, or you've heard a lot of things. So here's the time to ask the question. What I had been told was in earlier versions that there was a funding out clause, if you will. It was guaranteed if the revenue was available. Is that not still the case?
No. It is guaranteed. It is guaranteed. It is guaranteed up to the rate of the inflation. Now, if a local jurisdiction has a vote and raises more than that, we're not going to pay that. And let me tell you why. Because we actually were afraid someone might say, hey, we'll just put on the ballot to raise taxes since the state's going to pay for this. Y'all just go ahead and vote for it. It won't cost you anything. And we said, no, we needed to at least lock in for fiscal note determination what this will cost us plus the rate of inflation. No matter what you've heard, no matter what anybody has said. In fact, the chairman of this committee and the subcommittee last week asked a question, a very friendly question in this form. He said, so you're telling me that we are going to have a system where local governments already can take property to pay taxes, and now then on top of that, they're going to have a system where the state is going to guarantee constitutionally that we'll pay that part of the money? And the answer is yes.
Representative Knight, you're recognized for a question.
Mr. Speaker, going back to the caps, and I just want to make sure I'm on constitutional law. I know that in a lot of counties the issue is I believe our sheriff's departments or our sheriffs, those are constitutional offices, and that they set their budget. So what happens with these caps if a sheriff's department comes in with more expenses and it reaches the cap? What? I know it's been an issue locally.
People say that all the time, but sheriffs are elected just like commissioners are, and they don't have the ability to just indiscriminately say they want X amount of money and therefore it's going to be paid. It's all got to go through the process. And the commissioners have to approve the millage rates. Sheriffs don't approve millage rates. Commissioners do. But they'll have to make that decision, and it'll be put on the table. And commissioners and school districts and city councils will still set millage rates, but they'll have to prioritize. I'll tell you what I hear a lot. People say, well, what happens if a federal court orders us to build a new jail? Well, first of all, that's one of those specious arguments. Is that is not what occurs. What typically occurs is a federal court says the conditions in your jail are such that you shouldn't keep people there, and if you're going to keep locking people up, you ought to get a better facility. They don't tell you to go build a $10 million jail, a $5 million jail. You decide if that's what you need, and if you can't afford that, then you put it out for a bond. And if the people don't want to bond it, then you make decisions about contracting with other counties. It's not like you're foreclosed in what you have to do. You have lots of other options. Or you clean up the situation you've got.
I just know it's a big issue in my district with several of our offices, and we hear a lot.
Well, your commissioners still have to, notwithstanding that, and I'll limit this to sheriffs because sheriffs come within the budget of the county. While a sheriff is entitled to submit their budget, they don't have carte blanche authority. They couldn't submit a budget that would bankrupt the county, because ultimately the county commissioners set the millage rate and decide what they're budgeted. If they reach a disagreement, they can go to court over it, but it's all a reasonableness standard. And unfortunately, we have had to litigate those subjects between sheriffs and counties occasionally. But I'm going to say this. There's 159, and it's a rare instance that you have to litigate between a sheriff and a county commissioner because, like I said, the same voters elect both of them.
It does lead to spirited discussion.
It does have a spirited discussion at times. Having been involved in one of those in a prior life, I understand.
Number one is that I can't see. Representative Mosby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker.
Representative?
I know the compelling reason behind all of this is the growth rate in property taxes over the immediate time period. And I think I saw some information that if you grew out the expenses over the last 10 or 15 years, that we still would not have spent up to the probably what this bill would have done in terms of its caps on property taxes, so to speak. So what's the compelling reason for us to do this now?
There's a lot of compelling reasons. I don't think I don't want to be exhaustive because I might live something unimportant. But let me take y'all to square one. Right now today in Georgia, about 60 or so school districts have a suit against the state of Georgia contending that the method that we use to fund education, property taxes, is a violation of our own Constitution on adequacy of funding. And that if we continue to do that we're not educating the kids of Georgia. And they are trying to have the Georgia Supreme Court strike down that system. If that occurs, and I submit to you, and I want to be careful with this, but there are some basis for that argument. There's some basis for the argument that the ad valorem system does not adequately fund education. I understand that argument. But if a court were to tell us that we couldn't fund education with property taxes any longer, or at least the method we're doing, we have no method in place to change that. This starts us down the road to having a cure to do that. No, number two, we have tried to deal with rising property taxes in this state in many forms. In fact, there's another bill coming before this committee Representative Royal is going to handle that answers an issue where we're losing timberland in this state because growers of trees cannot afford to pay the taxes and grow trees and make it profitable. That's going to be handled separately. But all over this state, homeowners are being forced to make decisions as their taxes are rising more dramatically than their ability to earn income. And part of that is because there's more people coming in this state and there's less property owners. And what's happening is the demand for services is there. But the pool of people paying it is the same or very small compared to the overall population. This changes that and broadens the base of who's paying from about 2 million homeowners to 9.5 million residents. As I said to the subcommittee the other day, there are estimated to be around 1 million people illegally within the United States of America in this state today. Estimates. We don't know for sure. But here's what we know of for certain, that every single one of those are not paying very many direct taxes. They're sure not paying Georgia income taxes and rarely paying property taxes. By expanding the sales tax base to include groceries, lottery, and services, you instantly bring that population as taxpayers to pay for the system. And for all the others out there, I don't know whether it's 1 million or 2 million people, who pay virtually no taxes because they skirt the system, you bring them into the system. And so what you do is you bring in the money, and we're providing it as a credit back to property owners. We're letting 9.5 million Georgians pay for the burden of 9.5 million and taking just a little bit away from property owners. And I believe those two bases are the solid basis for a policy decision to change this. Now, as you know, if I had my way, we would have one tax in Georgia, a consumption tax, based upon sales and services. When you expend money, I would take away the income tax and the property tax. And stay tuned, I'm not through. I believe tax reform is the beginning here. And I believe that we ought to spread the burden of paying for government services over all citizens of this state, not just the property owners.
Just a quick follow-up on that. So on the caps, though, and I somewhat agree with you about sales tax. I do personally believe that there's some regressivity in it, but aren't we tying the hands of our local officials, though? Really?
Only
with the caps on the millage rate, and
only if their local citizens don't believe that they want us to pay more taxes, because we got an escape clause. We're tying their hands on what they can do without a vote, the governmental inflation rate. Plus, they can raise values 2% and 3% a year. So when you look at that, I can't remember what the government inflation rate was. It was over 4% last year, 4.2%. Local government can raise the amount of money 4.2%, plus new construction. So whatever that number is, in a growth community, it might be 5 or 6% more. But if they want to go more than that, they got to take it to the voters. And I think that's the ultimate local control. Citizens can decide, and they do it all the time. Citizens approve laws and bond issues all over this state. It sometimes amazes me at what citizens approve, but at least it lets those people decide if they're going to pay more or not. And is it tying the hands of local government? It may not be. It's putting a rope around them and putting restrictions on them.
Chair recognizes the Vice Chairman of this committee, Representative Sims.
Representative?
Mr. Speaker, one of my questions has been, and in our first iteration with this, and I know you've been through so many iterations, but where's the business community on this issue? We have not heard anything from the Georgia Chamber or any of those folks to come and to speak either for or against the bill. I just would like to know what the business community was feeling about it. Can you give us some indication of what they've talked with you about?
Well, the first versions, they didn't like, so we took them out of the equation. They essentially get no relief and don't pay for services, so we don't take any more for them or any less for them. Now, they do get the side benefit of the freezes, and I don't know if they're here or not, but I imagine that they're happy that their values don't go up indiscriminately, and they'll get the side benefit of millage rates not increasing more than the rate of inflation. So for the first time, business can predict what their tax liability will be. So I haven't heard from them since this form came out, but I can't imagine they would be opposed to it.
Okay. As a follow-up,
Please.
Is it not true that this measure is basically what we're left with at the school tax or the school funding level in the communities is going to be that any increase now in taxes for ad valorem will be the burden of commercial property? Is that true? I mean, even though it goes up 2 or 3%, whatever it is, the local position then is just going to be those local businesses that are going to be paying that tax. Is that not true if this measure does pass?
If the local district raises the millage rate up to the rate of inflation for homesteads, the homesteads will not pay any more.
I understand that.
But if they raise the millage rate at all non-homesteads will pay that. That is correct.
Okay. I mean,
You're
I don't.
You're talking about the assessments.
The assessment values and
the 2 and 3% on assessments, not millage rates. I think.
Well, I guess my thing is if we have a tax increase, whether it be the 2% cap on assessments or the rate of inflation on millage, that it's actually going to be the business or commercial property that is going to be picking up that increase. It won't be the homeowner. It will be the businesses. Is that correct?
I don't believe that's a correct statement. The businesses' values are frozen as well at 3% each year. So it won't be a backdoor increase, but if a millage rate goes up, a business, that is a true statement, at the rate, the business would pay more in school taxes.
Okay. And my final question, have you had a chance, I asked you a question yesterday and I wanted to just get your thoughts if you had a chance to think about it. About the sunset provision that we do have in the legislation, do you think that we should put that as a part of the ballot question to let the people know so that there are not repercussions later on if this measure does not work? If they vote for that, if they vote to take this tax off and we have to put it back on later, I really feel, I just want to know your feelings on that there may be repercussions.
We don't have to vote to put it back on. It automatically sunsets unless we vote to keep it.
But do we need to tell the people that?
It's in the amendment. The question is simply a broad statement of the general intent of the amendment. But as I said to you yesterday, this will sunset if we don't re-up it. And it's a safeguard for us to make sure that this is working. It is a part of the constitutional amendment that this will sunset on December 31st, 2012, if we do not reaffirm it. So that gives us the session of 9, 10, 11, and 12 at any time in there when we could reaffirm it.
Thank you.
Representative Flood, are you 13?
Yes.
So you recognize, sir, for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. I agree with you that we probably are ripe for tax reform. In fact, I sincerely agree with you that we need to do something. I had an observation and then a concern about the bill, because I think there are some potentially some good ideas within the bill. One of my concerns is the amount of revenue that is not today being captured, the amount of sales tax revenue that's not today being captured by the department, and their ability to manage the expansion of additional services to be taxed and the mechanics of that. And I understand that there's a 1-year kind of burn-in period for them to get ready. But will that require, how much of an expansion of staff and or equipment will the department have to implement to take on the additional burdens?
Well, I don't know. I don't think we know the answer to that. If the voters approve this, they get 13 months to do it. That was one of the reasons for the delayed effective date. Is we had it going in quickly, is to let them do that, and I'm sure they'll come to us and ask us for more money. It will take whatever actions they need to take to get it implemented, but 13 full months ought to be time. Now, you and I agree on if there are people not paying tax, and we know there are people not paying tax, it's just hard to capture people that are willing to commit a crime. You've got to have an aggressive effort. I'm in support of whatever you think is a good idea to raise collections. I read the material you submitted to me. I read with interest the section that you believe there's $1.2 billion of uncollected sales tax. If there's that much out there, we really need to be collecting it. I don't know where that number came from or who calculated it, but however they did it, we ought to go to the people that they calculated aren't paying it and send them a bill. And I say that seriously and in jest, but because if you can calculate how much is not being paid, it seems to me you know who might not be paying it, whoever does that. But Revenue said yesterday they don't know for sure that amount. They just suspect that there is an underground market, and don't we all suspect that? There is always in our society going to be those that avoid taxes. But we need to have the best policies and the best practices to collect that. And I'm with you. And if you've got an idea of how to collect an extra $1.2 billion in taxes, I'll sign me up.
I got a spot number 2 on House Bill 1264.
Well, now that did a little bit
reserved for you.
Representative, that did a little bit more than that when it raised that income tax rate to 7%. So I'm gonna have a little issue with that.
Well, I'm glad you
read
it.
But Representative Graves might be glad to sign on with you. Raises the income rate to 7.
I do have another question.
I don't think he's going to sign. I shouldn't have even said that.
But I have a question about, because and I'm glad that you did read the bill, and since I just gave it to you yesterday, it shows that you
no,
really
you gave
took
it to me this morning.
Well, yeah, that's right, this morning. That's right. Yeah. So thank you. And then this, if you saw in my bill, there is it's revenue neutral. The concern I have is the amount of growth that would have to occur for us to, assuming that the numbers are what the numbers are, which is the fiscal note of $827 million deficit, or at least a revenue loss in 2011, and that's from the fiscal note. What amount of growth would have to occur for us to not have an impact? And if in fact that number is even close to accurate, what services or budgetary cuts would have to be made?
Well, you can look at the out year, or you can look at all 3 years as the report does, and call it a $422 million tax cut. We're currently growing at a rate of around 5 or 6% of a year, so the math is pretty simple. It's somewhere between $1 billion and $1.2 billion increase. So it's an insignificant in light of, if you consider a $400 million over 3 years and $1 billion increase over 3 years, there's $3 billion to 4. So whatever proportion 30 bears to 4, that's the difference. So I don't believe there'll have to be a cut, but I'll go back to when we took the tax off groceries initially in 1997. We were aware that that was a $500 and some odd million cut each year, and yet notwithstanding that, we did it, and we still raised revenue more. This is a snapshot as if we did not have this policy, what it would look like in 2011. I don't believe there'll have to be a reduction in services. I just think there'll be a reduction in the amount coming in extra, and we'll have to make wise decisions about how we budget it, just like we do every day.
One follow, just an observation. So much of that new revenue is already going to be dedicated to things like education and health care and the Department of Juvenile Justice. It doesn't leave much room for discretionary spending. But thank you for...
I agree with that statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I don't see any more questions from members of the committee. And in the interest of organization, Mr. Speaker, we've actually interrogated you on the basis of the combination of 3 bills. So for our purposes at the committee level to ascertain the wishes of this committee, would you like to summarize for us one last time or or deal with House Resolution 1246 just by itself?
1246 is the resolution that takes care of the enabling legislation in 979 that essentially puts in the ability of us to provide relief to property owners from the school tax by the annual relief that we're going to give and the expanded homeowner tax relief grant. Without that component, we couldn't do anything with the extra revenues. We don't have the ability to do that now.
Right.
And we only have the ability of the HTRG. And so this basically is what gives us the power to give property owners the credit on their school taxes.
With the grant system, it's currently in place and has proven to work very well for the state.
That's correct. The HTRG system that's currently in place.
Okay, that is House Resolution, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, 1246. It is now time for me to ask, what is the pleasure of this committee? Chair recognizes Representative Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I make a due pass recommendation on House Resolution 1246.
I have a motion due pass on House Resolution 1246. Do I have a second? I have several seconds. Now, open for discussion. I have a motion and a second. It's now open for any further discussion. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion due pass, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Sounds to the chair that the ayes clearly have it. We will pass this legislation to the Rules Committee not later than 5 o'clock today. Mr. Speaker, if you would, summarize for us House Bill 979 as from the standpoint that it is unique from the general description you've already given this committee. And
979 is the implementation provisions of not only 1246 just passed, but Senate Resolution 796. We decided as our combined effort to include the enabling legislation within House Bill 979. It includes the state portion of eliminating the property tax of the state portion. It includes the fees on the vehicles, the taxes on groceries and lottery, and the services tax with all the details. And it provides the specific remedies for how we go about calculating the homeowner tax relief grant and the school tax credit.
That was House Bill 979. You all have it in your packets. What is the pleasure of this committee? Chair recognizes Caucus Chair, Representative Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a due pass recommendation on House Bill 979.
Happy for your recommendation.
I mean, motion, excuse me, Mr. Chairman. And recommendation.
There are probably several of both sides of that in this audience. We have a motion due pass. Do I hear a second? Is there any further discussion? House Bill 979. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion due pass signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. It's obvious to the chair the ayes carry. We will submit that House Bill 979 to the Rules Committee this afternoon. Now, Mr. Speaker, Senate Resolution 796. If you could, please, sir, summarize that for the committee.
Senate Resolution 796 has the freezes on the residential and non-residential at 2% and 3% respectively for a year from the 2008 value. It has the caps on local jurisdictions on the millage rate not to exceed bringing in revenue. That's the previous year's revenue plus the rate of inflation at the governmental rate. And it adds one thing, that it includes the 20 mil limitation on school districts by adding a requirement that if the school district wishes to raise the beyond the 20 mil limit, in addition to submitting a referendum, it's got to have local legislation to propose the referendum.
Thank you, sir. What is the pleasure of the committee on Senate Resolution 796? I have a motion due pass. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion on Senate Resolution 796, who, by the way, I would like to recognize and also say a word of appreciation to its author, the senator is with us here today, and we thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't say that, and I should have. Senator Rogers has been at virtually every meeting we've had this year on property tax reform in Georgia, and I should have acknowledged his participation in this. We have worked very closely together to come up with a remedy.
I would probably keep us all here on these hard seats for about 3 more hours if I tried to acknowledge everybody that has worked so hard and so long on every aspect of this legislation on both sides of the third floor as well as within these committee walls, both day and night. But suffice to say, I don't know since I've been here that I've seen any legislation vetted in as much detail and with as long hours as this. And for all those that work so hard to make this the best it can possibly be, you certainly have my sincere appreciation for that hard work, and I hope the people of Georgia realize how lucky they are to have you. Okay, no further discussion. Senate Resolution 796, all in favor of the motion do pass, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. The ayes clearly have it. We will submit that to the rules. We thank you, Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for your time. Thank you.
For the folks in the audience, we're going to go quickly now into first readers. We're going to assign bills to subcommittees, even if we don't have a first reader. But this committee's tradition, hopefully, will always be to allow the full committee to hear all matters that are before the committee before they are signed. So, with no further ado. Okay, thank you. Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Hey. Are you ready? All right. The chair recognizes the preeminent medical expert in this entire Capitol, Chairman Mickey Chanel. Would you tell us a little bit about House Bill 1229?
Thank you for that gracious introduction, Mr. Chairman.
It'll cost you later.
I know it. Mr. Chairman, I hope you have in front of you a committee substitute, LC 187156S. LC 187156S.
That's correct. That's what we do have. Did each member of the committee have that in their packet? Yes, we do, sir. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this bill does one thing, and it provides a taxpayer who is a physician, a doctor, who provides uncompensated medical services through a free health clinic, a tax credit for such services at the rate of $25 per hour. The notion is to incentivize physicians to come into these free clinics and provide services. That's what it does, Mr. Chairman.
That's certainly, I think, a great idea, and I look forward to that being debated in subcommittee. And, of course, since it is an income tax credit, we're going to assign that to our income tax subcommittee. And the chairs of that, for your information, sir, are Chairman Jan Jones or Chairman David Knight. And I'm sure either of these chairmen will be able to arrange hearings for you at your earliest convenience. And we thank you. Did you have any other business before this committee today?
No, sir.
We thank you for that presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Make sure I don't embarrass any. Is Representative Marin here? I see Speaker Pro Tem Burke. I couldn't see you. Do you have business with the community?
Well, I thought I did. I'll be glad to let. No, go ahead. Absolutely.
I am so sorry. Please,
I'm glad to watch the
Speaker Pro Tem Burkhalter, if you.
Here's going to go. I'll go. Go ahead.
All right, Representative Mayor.
Real quick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and
House
distinguished
Bill
members.
1219.
House Bill 1219 is to provide income tax credit for qualified citizenship expenses for low-income families and military personnel. This is to pay the fees to the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. The citizenship fee went up 66%, and what we're trying to achieve is to encourage legal permanent residents to assimilate, integrate, and of course be part of this great nation. If you have any questions, and looking forward to seeing subcommittee and kind of tweaking it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We thank you for that overview. I don't see any questions. Representative Mayor, we'll be assigning that to our income tax subcommittee. That would be Chairman Jones or Chairman Knight. Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, please accept my sincere apologies. You're recognized for House Resolution 1306.
Not at all. Not at all. No apology necessary at all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the great work you do in this committee. I bring to you today, members of the committee, Mr. Chairman, House Resolution 1306. This is a constitutional amendment that tries to address something that I think most of the General Assembly have admitted that we have a crisis in, and that being our trauma system in Georgia. It certainly is underfunded, overutilized, and we have major gaps in our trauma care throughout Georgia, particularly in rural Georgia. And as you probably know, there's a number of propositions floating around this year to try to address this matter. I believe this is the best one, and actually will go a long way towards creating a dedicated revenue source towards this critical area. What it does is dedicates the quarter mil that the state collects on Georgians' property taxes to this fund, to the Georgia Trauma Trust Fund. It generates currently, based on a fiscal note, somewhere around $78 million a year, and there's a proposition I know floating around to actually give this back to the taxpayers. I would submit to you, I think it's a better idea for this General Assembly to, if we have the money that we've already collected from Georgians, and Georgians deem this to be an area we need to spend money on, then we ought to do it from our existing resources and not come up with another funding mechanism. Respectfully, the proposition is very simple. Just dedicates that quarter mil to the Trauma Care Network. There's estimated in closing, some 700 Georgians who die needlessly, at least 700 a year because of our gaps in our system. The estimates range all over the board as to what we need to sufficiently fund it. Some say 80 to 85 million, some say more. I think it's, regardless of what level you think government ought to play in people's life, I think most people agree that this is an area that we probably ought to assist in. They have 9.3 million Georgians. We have 15 designated trauma units in Georgia. South Carolina has less than half the population, has 22 by comparison. So, respectfully, that's what the bill does, and look forward to seeing in subcommittee.
Would the Speaker Pro Tem yield for a question or two from a committee member
Be glad
at this point? 15? Is that okay? Representative Gray?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, I just more of a comment. I just want to thank the Speaker Pro Tem for basically putting together a measure. It looks like we're prioritizing the needs of the state instead of we've got a lot of issues, and it seems like there's a steady stream of ideas to add additional revenue to accomplish these purposes. But I applaud you for looking with inside the means we already have.
Well, thank you for the comment. I think there are two genuine discussions and debates that we'll have. One is let's get into the real challenges we have of trauma care, and let's reveal those. And secondly, there's a funding mechanism. I think there's a real debate there as well. But thank you for the comment.
And you're right, sir. There's certainly nobody is protected. All of us are potential trauma victims, all of our children and all of our fathers and mothers and friends. And
that's right.
I certainly laud your efforts in bringing yet another great idea for debate to this General Assembly. we're going to assign that to our tax reform subcommittee, and that the chairs of that are Representative Peake and Representative Mills, and I hope they will expeditiously move this right along. We thank you very much,
Chairman.
Okay. Our great friend from across the hall, Chairman Senator Rogers, Chairman of Senate Finance, Senate Resolution 859, please, sir.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's hard to follow on the exact same subject. I think that we've been on this topic of property taxes for quite some time, and I'll say my philosophy is the 3 R's of property tax, and that is reform, reduce, and remove. And what I have before you today is an effort to actually remove the state from the acts of taxing property. I just philosophically believe that we shouldn't tax something we own anyway, but that's another issue for another day, and I'm sure this body's not quite to that point yet. Maybe someday later we'll discuss that. But I don't necessarily disagree with what the Speaker Pro Tem suggested, but I also think that we probably have enough money to fund it and get rid of the state property tax and get the state out of the business of taxing something that someone's already purchased. And I'd like to see us do that. So this resolution would ask the people if they'd like to join us in that effort, and that's simply all it does.
Thank you, Senator. I don't see any questions. We thank you for that presentation. We look forward to that being debated, and that'll also be in our tax reform subcommittee, and they'll be anxious to get a hearing on that. Thank you very much. All right. Is anyone here for a first reader that has another obligation that just has to go in a hurry? Representative?
I actually do, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Representative Reese. House Bill 1275, is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's right.
Right. Tell us about it, please, sir, if you would.
Well, I appreciate it. I was a little dejected long ago. I thought everybody came to hear my bill, and they left when the Speaker left. I was a little upset about that, but I'll try to continue on.
They may be coming back.
Well, that's true. It could be a potty break. But, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity. This is a real simple idea, and I've laid a packet to. I hope I got one to every member here. This is a very simple idea. It's a smaller version of the reservoir bill, if you will, and it's called rain harvesting. Other states do it. As it's raining right now, we have water running off the top of this building, going into a sewer, going back into the system. Sometimes we get too much, and we have streets flooding. And at my house the other day, we got close to 3 inches of rain, and so I lost part of my yard on the side. If I would have had one of these systems, and most every one of y'all have this on your desk, this is an example from Texas. And there's also a table of contents on the back 2 pages, give you some ideas about the research and the development of these systems in other states. And this was just to give you an idea that this is not a new idea, but I think it's new in Georgia, and I think it's time we jump on the bandwagon. This basically gives a credit. It's a very simple bill. And I appreciate the quick hearing. Actually, I had some things I wanted to do to this bill. I had a first reader yesterday, second reader today, and I'm standing in front of you this afternoon. So this was a shell bill. I had to drop it fairly quickly to get it in by day 20. And there are some things I want to do, and open to ideas, too, from your committee, amendments or whatever. But it's basically a tax credit for people who put in these systems, whether it be a business or a residence. There's some good environmental impacts of putting in a system like this, holding down erosion. The water will get back into the system, so you don't have to worry about people keeping it. They're going to use it to irrigate their lawns or flush their toilets or however they want to plumb it. And other states do that. So with that, I'll hush. And
I certainly think that's a unique idea, and we certainly appreciate all of the information you've already gathered for the committee to look at. And we're going to be signing this, Representative Reese, to our income tax subcommittee, and of course that's Chairman Jan Jones or Chairman David Knight. These two, they're actually sitting together down here today.
That's sweet, too.
It'll kind of be up to them. It'll kind of be up to them how rapid we continue to approach this great idea. So if you'll get in touch with them, we'll do that. But it does sound great, and we thank you for that presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. Thank you.
All right. Chairman Joe Wilkerson. Tell us about House Bill 1241, please, sir. Thank you for your patience.
I'm more concerned about the rules chairman if he needs to go.
Oh, he does? Hey, he's got a bill.
Oh. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring to you House Bill 1241, which is legislation that we passed last year, both in the House and the Senate. Unfortunately, it got lumped in with that Encore Park bill vetoed by the governor. The governor said to please bring this back as a separate bill, which is what we're doing, and it basically is very tightly drawn. It's to help the dental clinics, and very particularly for us in North Georgia, the Massell Dental Clinic, which treats 6,000 indigent patients a year. They're expanding to 9,000 per year. It's almost a 100-year-old organization. 100 dentists volunteer their time, and we want to help them with some sales tax incentives so that they can expand this building, take on 3,000 new patients a year, and buy the updated equipment that's needed.
That's certainly inspirational to hear that sort of volunteerism out there. Aren't Georgians wonderful people?
Yes, sir. Best in the world.
Yep. We thank you for that presentation, and we're going to put that in our sales tax subcommittee. That would be Chairman Chuck Martin or Chairman Jeff Lewis.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Representative Kaiser, are you with us today? We have House Bill 1260 by Representative Margaret Kaiser, which I will assign to our ad valorem subcommittee. If you would, Madam Secretary, make sure she knows that. Representative Sean Jurgensen, are you with us? There you are. House Bill 1276, please, sir. Brief summary.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brief summary of this bill is brought by my county, Cherokee County. It's one of the few counties in the state who does not have a loss tax. And basically the premise of the bill is simply to allow the counties to implement a qualified service district under the Article 9, Section 2, Paragraph 4 of the Constitution, and then be able to use the lost revenue to offset the millage rate on property taxes in those special service districts.
That'll be an interesting debate. That subject matter has been around for quite some time and in and out of the Constitution. We look forward to that, and it's another new and bright idea, I think. We're going to assign that to our sales tax subcommittee. That's Chairman Martin or Chairman Lewis, and we thank you for that presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm going to suspend first readers because the rest of them I have are all committee members, so we can do that at the end of the committee because anyway, and give our rules chairman an opportunity to come tell us about
938.
House Bill 938, which was reported due pass out of our tax reform subcommittee this past week, I believe it was.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, would tell us about House Bill 938, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, Representative Bob Smith takes role in his subcommittees, and if I miss that, he might not invite me to his next birthday party. So I appreciate the expeditious nature of that. You realize those are very important. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, I want to direct your attention to the substitute for House Bill 938 that the subcommittee was generous enough to pass out, along with a proposed amendment. It was discussed in the subcommittee, and it was also discussed a great deal between now and then, along with a letter from the Georgia Manufacturers Association, which is also should have been passed out to you. I believe it has not, Ms. Lindsay? Thank you. And the amendment itself, let me talk about the bill first. And you'll also have a letter in your package today from the Association of County Commissioners, if you'll refer to that too, in expressing support for 938. 938 is very simple now. We've gone through the process. We've taken away the referendum that we had originally wanted to apply, which seemed to cause a great deal of heartburn. We're down to just a very couple simple things, philosophically very easy things. First thing being transparency. This has been a hidden tax for 50 years. That's too long. We need to make sure that the citizens of the state of Georgia understand what it is that they're paying with respect to this. It's now going to be required to be called what it is. It's a tax. It goes to the general funds of the municipality. It doesn't go to a specific purpose. That makes it a tax, ladies and gentlemen. And then it has to say on the bill, tax paid to. There's also a requirement, instead of the referendum, that there be 2 public hearings originally, and if there's any increase in this, it can go up to 5 in the municipalities. And then very finally, and I think the most important part of the bill, the part that's taxation without representation. For all this time, this tax has been applied to the unincorporated resident of the state of Georgia. The unincorporated resident receives no benefit from this. It receives no ability to vote for those individuals on the city councils who are spending their money. That's certainly not local control. That's certainly wrong. It says that you will no longer be able to tax those residents or spend their money without them being represented. So what you'll find, if you look at the summary that you have in front of you, I think the ACC did a really good job. It just says that specifically the actual effect on the municipalities now would be very small, $1.55 a month, to do one of the best consumer things you can do for an unincorporated resident in this state. Let me talk to you just really briefly about the amendment, and then I'll stop and let you ask questions. We've hashed this out pretty well. It basically says that any franchise tax authorized pursuant, this is what's different to this paragraph, shall not be levied on or computed based on any revenues from customers of an electric light or power company that are engaged in the manufacture or processing of tangible personal property primarily for the resale, nor shall such customers be charged a franchise tax or portion thereof. This is an economic development issue. As you can see in the letter from GMTA, it's important that we continue to be competitive. I think, once again, it's a tax cut for certain segments, and to me, tax cuts are always in order. They're always the right thing. They're not tax shifts. A tax cut is philosophically the easiest way to limit government and to cut spending. It's a very simple equation. If you don't have the money, you can't spend it. And finally, there is some information in your package, and this is the first time I've seen it. I was looking over there. It's titled GMA 2008 Franchise Fees Survey Cities, and it purports to tell you how much a city would lose with respect to this. And ladies and gentlemen, I question the numbers on their face. And then I want to talk about the credibility of this. You look at how would they replace the revenue? Don't you love that concept? And then I want to read you some of the for the $1.55 and this 4%. One of them is we're going to double the property tax. Another one is we're going to 73% millage increase. Another a 66% millage increase. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a 4% piece. They're going to double the property tax if they lose that 4%, that $1.55 a month. I think that goes to the credibility of these individuals' numbers. I think they speak for themselves with respect to that nonsense, to tell you the truth. It'd be better to put some realistic concerns down there. And then they always talk about what services would be cut. They never talk about, the new Taj Mahal of a city hall or those retreats that they go on or a little off the hors d'oeuvre budget. They're always going to get you in your public safety first. Why do they always go to public safety first? Wouldn't it be wise to cut in some other areas? I just find that disingenuous, and don't make the citizens' safety the scapegoat every time that you have to draw back the rate of growth of government a little bit. Mr. Chairman, that's basically my presentation. Ask for your favorable consideration. I'm certainly willing to answer as many questions as you have.
Yes, sir. If you would yield some questions. I know
Certainly.
We have some new data that's just come to us for the first time, so I'm sure there probably will be some questions on some
Be glad
of that.
to.
And I have one, and then I'll recognize another member. The ACCG memorandum that computes the $1.55 tax increase to city residents, that was done without the knowledge of the amendment, I'm guessing, or is that if the amendment does pass?
I would assume such.
Which?
I would assume that's correct. It was without the amendment. That was previous to the amendment.
So if we also remove the business enterprises within the city limits
Just the
from
manufacturer.
the fee. The residents' amount would go up substantially more than this.
I don't think it'd be substantially more. I think they're a small portion of the amount. What I saw in the PSC filing or the PSC documents and the testimony in that was, I mean, even with that in there and taking it completely out was only 1 to 1.75%. So I don't think that's going to change a great deal.
But it would. The amendment,
I think it may
if the
go up.
amendment passes, it would put more of the burden on the residents. So
If
it passed.
No, not the if side. If the citizens don't convince those who are in elected office in those areas to perhaps trim some spending in some other arenas. Now, that's to me, that's the whole basis of cutting taxes. You want to draw back the size of government. You want them to cut spending somewhere. And I know that
it's certainly going to get their attention. I can see that.
I think it has their attention.
And it has already, as a matter of fact. Representative Roberts? You pass?
Yeah, I guess
7. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
yes, ma'am.
My concern with the number that's been brought forth by ACCG only takes into consideration Georgia Power. Did they provide you with numbers that take into consideration the fact that the City of Atlanta has franchise fees from AGL, from Comcast, from Bell South, and from a number of other utilities, and that cities across the state have other? So the 155 number seems to me to be slightly an undercount of, I would say, a substantial undercount of what's actually imposed in terms of franchise fees across the state.
Actually, I disagree, because right now you'll also notice in there that Bell South, now AT&T, and the telephone providers have already changed their practices years ago. They no longer collect those fees from the unincorporated resident. Okay. With respect to most of the largest EMCs in the state, they no longer collect those fees from the residents. And cable franchise fees are a different animal altogether, because those are counties do collect cable. They do collect that. So this does not apply in that case.
Thank you.
Chairman Jones?
I have a question. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Good to see the substitute. It has changed a lot from the original.
Correct. There's no longer a referendum is the biggest change.
To your understanding, this chart of franchise fees that GMA is like, is that all of the franchise fees for that city, or is it just the Georgia Power ones?
I would suggest it's all.
Could you get your microphone up?
And I would suggest
we can hear you, but other people.
Representative Jones, I like I said, I'm somewhat skeptical of that data in the first place. I mean, I don't want to say unequivocally that it's wrong, but from the numbers I've seen previously, I would suggest that's all the franchise fee from everything, and not just the portion.
And if I'm reading your bill right, with regard to all franchise fees other than the portion like Georgia Power that's paid for by unincorporated residents but given to cities, that the other franchise fees would be unaffected, except for that the city would have to hold 2 hearings as long as they don't increase the franchise
Correct.
fee or impose new ones.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm looking at this, and I'm sorry to say this, but I feel quite certain that this has to be all of the franchise fees that are levied. None of them would be affected except for the imposition of 2 public hearings, unless, except for the power portion, unless a city chose to increase the franchise fee or impose a new one.
That's correct. They could also choose, what you would hope, is to perhaps take that tax off their citizenry and
I was trying to
you're right. No,
realize the impact of this,
yes,
because it's so different from your original bill.
Yes, it was. A lot less without the referenda, I would submit.
Number 6, is that something? There's no one there unless I can't see anymore.
It's the invisible.
I see. Okay.
I was just pressing the button.
Did you really push your button this time? Is this a trick? Well, let me recognize you then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, so in other words, what we're looking at here in the GMA 2008 franchise fees, wouldn't you say that the numbers here are probably grossly misreported here compared to what actually would be the loss?
I would say so. Yes, I would.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any other questions for the, number 9, who is that? Representative Knight?
Mr. Chairman, I'm looking on this, and everybody's, what is the numbers, though? I mean, we're going back and forth. Is it grossly overstated, or is it not?
I think it is grossly overstated. I think it includes every franchise fee that could possibly be paid into the municipality. It does not include the city portion. In other words, it's not taking into account that this legislation does not affect the city portion at all, other than the exemption that goes to the manufacturing facilities. It only affects the unincorporated, since you can no longer collect it from an unincorporated citizen, which is, no question, there is an impact. The ACCG has figured that at around $1.55 per month per household, residential customer. I trust that number.
As you know, I'm a numbers sort of guy.
Yes, you are.
That's what I do, and when we're sitting here talking about numbers, they're either right or they're wrong. And that's what I'm trying to get at here is what is the right number here? What is the true impact that is here? And
okay, I can't speak for the individual cities and the data in that, sir. You're right. What I can speak to is that the numbers that were uncovered with respect to what the PSC did in the testimony that came before them. Statewide, in the portion that this bill would affect, the overall number was about $110 million. Okay, that's all of it. Okay, that's city portions and county portions. Okay, 45% of that $110 million is unincorporated residents being taxed, in my mind, without any representation. So 45% of $110 million. This is what was testified to in the PSC, and also again in the Fulton County case that Judge Maness decided. That's now under appeal. All right. Of that, so in other words, what's left is $55 million. Now, those are numbers I trust because the PSC staff developed those along with the numbers that were submitted to the court. That, by the way, were not challenged in that that I could see in any of the filings with respect to that suit. So you're talking about what's 110 minus 45, 110 million minus 45%, which is the unincorporated number. Okay. That's taken from the unincorporated residents, so that's what, $60 million? And I'd submit that on this spreadsheet there's a heck of a lot more than $60 million. So that somebody's math doesn't add up, either the PSC's or mine. And I would tend to submit to you that mine is much closer. I can't speak for the individual cities, in other words. But look at the other claiming, look at the remarks out to the right. We're going to double the property tax when we lose this. That tends to what the point I was trying to make is that their credibility sort of falls apart when you make a statement like that based on a 4% franchise fee that you're still going to collect. I can't give a great deal of credence to numbers that are juxtaposed with those types of statements.
Further inquiry? While you're coming, I do. Do you know now how the tax is a portion that is collected from the non-municipal consumers?
Yes, sir. And the committee chair was absolutely correct. I had misinterpreted it because it said by the fourth month. It is a yearly, and it is by the fourth month when it has to be remitted to each of the individual cities. And it's also
you were right about that, and that's done differently for each one. We were both right about that.
Yeah.
But my question was, like for instance, in my case, I have 3 cities in Houston County.
Right.
And then I have a lot of area in my county that's not incorporated. Those people in the not incorporated area that are paying the franchise fees,
right,
all this money goes to cities. The county can't get any of it.
Correct.
So if I live in an unincorporated area that's somewhere near 3 cities, who gets my goodie out of that? I'm paying the fee. Which of those 3 cities gets it? Do you know how that's apportioned?
It's based on the per capita of the population number in those cities. That's what I've been told. That's the way it was written up into the testimony in front of the PSC.
It was? Okay. Yes, ma'am. Stacy?
Mr. Chairman, one additional question. My concern regarding the number of entities that are in the city of Atlanta that are subject to franchise agreements comes primarily from being one of their lawyers and helping do these.
I understand.
And so my concern is that by virtue of changing the term from fee to tax, you possibly create a cause of action that would invalidate the underlying franchise fee agreements, because the city of Atlanta, I know certainly, and there are several court cases that have determined that franchise fees are not taxes for very specific reasons, because the tax has a very different treatment, and therefore, as a fee, it's a rental fee. You don't have to tell where the monies are going. You're charging a rental fee for use of your space. My concern is that this bill, and that the use of the term tax has a larger implication than simply the $1.55, because you possibly call into question the validity of all the underlying franchise fee agreements that each of the municipalities have entered into, and you can potentially abrogate all of those agreements. Has there been any legal analysis of the actual impact of changing the terminology and indeed the legal definition of what a franchise fee agreement does for those agreements for those communities?
Okay. First, there's a couple questions involved in that. I don't think in any way, shape, or form with respect to abrogation of the contract itself, I don't think this semantic change will do that. I haven't seen the court. I'd be interested in seeing the cases that you cite with respect to fees and taxes. I've asked that several times. No one has been able to say that there is. To me, a tax is very simply, anything that a government can take from an individual. I think it's merely a semantic differential. I don't think in any way that this will affect the contracts overall. Those can be renegotiated if they have to, but I can't imagine a court that would in any way say that a basic semantic change such as that is going to make a difference in a 35-year contract or something along those lines. That's personal opinion.
All right, sir. 29, who's that? Oh, Chairman Rice.
Mr. Chairman, forgive me for really not understanding the whole franchise fee, but let me give you an example. I live in unincorporated Gwinnett in Peachtree Corners, and Duluth is, let's say Duluth is the domicile for Comcast or somebody of that ilk. Now, what you're telling me is that for the service that's provided, I am being charged some franchise fee that is actually determined by the city of Duluth.
Absolutely.
And applied to my bill.
Correct.
I mean, I'm not sure. Is there legal precedent? There's got to be legal precedent for doing that. I would assume.
The original act allowed municipalities to place on the utility bills of not only, incorporated but unincorporated residents. In other words, the utility itself is the tax collector. In fact, in this, for years you didn't even know it. It was just in the bill. Now the PSC is coming out, although that's being appealed by the cities. I don't know. I guess I don't want it to be seen, but that case where the court said and the PSC said that they had to put it on the bill. Now, so what happens is let's use Georgia Power because it says that previously that 4% was added to the bill of the unincorporated resident, and then all the money came back into Georgia Power, and then Georgia Power once a year turn it around and send a check directly to the municipality. So in effect, the unincorporated resident is paying a tax to the general fund of the individual cities, and I would submit not receiving any service or having the ability to have anything to say about the elected body of that area.
Since I am in unincorporated Gwinnett, why wouldn't the fee be apportioned to the county, which I am
because the statute does not allow the county to take any of that money. They can't. The statute doesn't allow counties to receive the franchise tax proceeds.
Then you considered that when you did this?
I've had that asked me. To me, I prefer to give the consumer. Once again, this is that tax cut versus tax shift. To me, I'd rather give the consumer the break, and if the government entity needed more money, say the county or the city, they could do it straight up front. I don't like these hidden taxes. To me, it's been hidden. It's a bad way to tax. If you want to
hidden
tax
from me.
No. Yeah. if you want the money, ask the people in your district or your city, how to get it.
Thank you.
Representative Knight.
Mr. Chairman, two questions. I'm trying to understand this and put the numbers together, okay? And we've heard a bunch of things here, but one is exactly what utilities are affected. I've heard we'll use Georgia Power, or is it only Georgia Power? I'm totally confused. Okay. We keep going back to utilities. Everybody assumes just Georgia Power. What is it? That's one question. Now, please help me understand that.
It's Georgia Power. The EMCs, it affects the EMCs also, but they're just not doing it. The major EMCs are. Some of the smaller ones are. It'll affect them. It'll affect the Bells that may or may not Bell South nor now ANTT, because they've voluntarily changed their practice. So if they were, then they couldn't do it, but not since they're not. That cable is not the same, Comcast or that kind of thing, because it is a completely different statutory construction. You have counties in that law that Representative Lewis passed last year can take some of the franchise fee from the cable equation, and the cities also get their portion of the cable equation, so it doesn't affect them. So that's the utilities that we're talking about. Does that make more sense?
And when we're talking about utilities, we're talking about our power utilities as far as electricity.
Correct.
And are we missing any?
Not that I'm aware of.
The second question is, going back to this county-city thing, is what do the utilities pay when they go on the county portion and they start using county right-of-way? Do they pay anything in to use that? In other words, the argument is, all right, you're using right-of-way, and we get to right-of-way, and here's within the city, and here's without.
No, the counties don't get anything in that sense.
So the utilities do not pay.
Here's what they do. Let me try to put this in a little bit of perspective too. Most of the roads through municipalities are county roads, or state roads, or even any more developer roads. Something is developed, those roads, and then they're turned over. So one of the things that you'll see that came out in the actual Fulton County decision of Judge Manis, she said there was no evidence presented that any of the money went to anything like right-of-way maintenance or specifically to those benefits to the utility itself. Now, whether or not evidence was presented, it would seem to me that the intuitive piece of that is that the money's all going into the general fund. So what I'm saying is that, specific to your question, you've got a situation where there is no money from the unincorporated area that's going to any benefit to the unincorporated area at the county level. The money's collected from the unincorporated bill payer, go through the utility company, and are remitted directly back to the city in their general fund. So the unjust portion of this is, how can you in good conscience ask an unincorporated resident to pay a fee or a tax, I prefer to call it a tax, for something that, in other words, what are they getting? One of the things that it seems to be a part of this fog machine that is created here, you've got a situation where anything that a utility does to the right-of-way in a city or a county, if they touch it, if they cut a hole in it, they pay for that individually. It's not like that's coming out of the general fund. If Georgia Power or the Cobb EMC cuts a hole in the road, that doesn't come in the city of Powder Springs. That doesn't come out of the city's general fund. They charge them a specific fee over and above anything else, specifically over and above franchise fees, to fix that problem. They have to make it right. Does that answer your question?
It helps. One further question.
Okay.
Make sure I'm understanding how things flow. Okay. If I'm sitting here in a county, and I charge a permit to, for whatever reason, the utilities on there, and there's a permit, and that's coming to me, okay, the county. Obviously, the utility has got to turn around and include that in their expenses somewhere, right?
Correct, but the counties don't charge a franchise fee for utilities. Yes, sir. You see that you've gone right to the heart of the matter there. The counties don't charge Now, the utilities themselves, there's another bill that I think Senator Schaefer's working on, is the pole charge, but that's from the utilities to the people who use the actual poles and the infrastructure themselves. But there is no charge from the county to the utility itself unless they buy a specific piece of right-of-way. Now, that goes into the rate base. Specifically, let's say Georgia Power was going to go across a piece of county land, and they had to buy that from the county. The cost of that goes into the rate base itself. When Georgia Power or EMC went to the Public Service Commission the next time and talked about what their rate schedule was going to be, at that point, that is an overhead type of cost. That's built into the overall rate base that's spread across the whole state. The same is true in the cities. But where the distinction is the franchise fee itself is not, the benefits aren't spread across the whole rate base. The benefits go directly and only into the geographic area of the municipalities.
One more question.
Okay.
I appreciate you indulging me because this is totally confusing.
I understand.
All right. When you go into a city, though, and Georgia Power or whoever's trying to buy right-of-way in the city, are they paying for the right-of-way, or are they just paying a franchise fee?
They have to pay for the right-of-way. Absolutely. They don't get it for free. And that's in the overhead that's in the rate base that's separate from the franchise fee.
Okay, you want to rest a while? We hadn't heard. We hadn't heard from Representative Flood in a little while, and then we're going to hear from Representative Peake. So, Representative Flood?
Move the previous question.
Pardon?
Move the previous question.
I'm not recognizing you for a motion right now.
I like this motion.
I do have one other question. Tim.
Chairman.
Representative Peake.
Chairman Hart, just you made a comment. Just I want to make sure I understand too. I think maybe it's just Representative Knight and I. We're just getting confused over here. The EMCs are not charging franchise fees?
Some of the large and EMCs have done this on their own. This is actually where the catalyst was. Cobb County, Georgia, the commission went to probably the largest EMC in the state, Cobb EMC, and made a pitch that you shouldn't be charging the unincorporated customers. This is not breaking new ground. This has been the phone companies did it unilaterally. The biggest EMCs are doing it unilaterally, and you haven't heard the sky has not fallen in the cities in those areas based on that.
Right.
So, no question, they're already doing it, but they're not doing it on your power bills. And
you got an estimate? I mean, half of them are doing it. Half of the EMCs.
I don't know about the EMCs. I really don't know. I know about the big bells and AT&T, which is, I would submit, is probably a significant portion of the market. But I don't know how many of the big EMCs. I really don't. I know the total number was the 110.
Yeah.
But
all right. I don't see any more questions. Would you like an opportunity to summarize?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
After the Q&A.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate the questions too. It is an interesting issue with respect to how this has been done. Maybe part of the problem is it's been hidden for so long that makes it much more difficult to get a handle on. Ladies and gentlemen, the most important part of this, I think, is the idea that individual citizens, consumers in this state, are paying for something that they're not getting any benefit from, and that's just not right. I mean, you can't make an argument that that's right. If somebody could stand up and prove a benefit that they were getting, other than, boy, it's just nice to, I guess the city of Los Angeles could come in here and say, gee, we could usually use your help. Why don't we get a fee that we can help you out? So you might come through L.A. sometime. A nice place to visit. But, if you're not getting a benefit and you don't have any ability to elect those who are making the spending decisions with your money, that's not the way this country was built. That whole taxation without representation piece. And we've really drawn this down. There's no longer a referendum. The transparency is there. The ability for the cities to make their case to their own constituency through the public hearings. And then, again, the idea that it's now going to be on the bill so that everybody can see it. And that's really all it does. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Thank you. Representative Earhart, what is the pleasure of this committee? I have a motion due pass. Do I hear a second? I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Yes, Representative Peake.
No, sir.
Okay. Representative Graves, is that right?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had one amendment, I think, that was passed out. That is this the appropriate time to discuss amendments?
It is.
Okay.
It is.
Thank you. In one of the subcommittee meetings, we had a discussion about the remitting of these taxes to the municipalities on a regular basis, mirroring the sales tax remission schedule, and this amendment just allows for that. It inserts in between lines 25 and 26 on page 2, and would just require that those who are collecting this tax remit it on the 20th day following the previous month, just like sales tax. I think the sponsor of the bill agreed that he was in support of that.
Mr. Chairman.
For the benefit of the members of the committee, you should have before you in your package AM 181434, which I think is that correct. That's the amendment you just spoke of. Is there objection to that amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I would object. I would like to speak to that now. If there's any, may I at least discuss that?
You certainly may.
Ladies and gentlemen, when I spoke to the subcommittee, I was unaware of how this was actually done. It's done on a yearly basis, and I told Representative Graves I'd be glad to work with him with respect to this. I haven't heard from him since that day, a week and a half ago. In the interim, I've talked to the utility companies. This is a poison pill. The utility companies would all have to turn around and be against this particular piece of legislation if that were to be the case. It's not doable to remit this by the 20th day of each month. You'd be cutting 5,000 checks per month. There'd be a cost. This would be an overhead cost that would go into the consumers. This would be an overhead that would be allowed by the PSC in their consumer rate-based filings. So I would ask you not to accept that amendment. I was hopeful that Representative Graves would have brought this to me in the interim, because we said we would work together on this, but not that it was an absolute unequivocal. And in the interim, I've got a lot of further information.
Mr. Chairman, if I might.
You certainly are, Representative Graves.
And again, I understand your comments on me working with you, and I guess it's the first I've heard that you have an objection to it, so I think it goes both ways. Because when we were in the committee meeting, you understood the dilemma there, and while there may be 5,000 checks written, and I'm not sure that that's the appropriate number or not, but it seems like there is a varying schedule currently, and there's some that do it once a year, which if we were to pass this bill here, we would be allowing a private company in the state of Georgia to withhold taxpayer funds for 1 year, and that's certainly not a position I support. And then there are some that do it, I guess, 6 months, some that do it every 3 months, and I believe some that do it maybe even shorter than that. But each of these companies currently collects sales tax. They seem to not have a problem in remitting sales tax on the 20th day of the following month of collecting sales tax. We just took up a measure that would double the number of I guess tax collectors in the state of Georgia by adding services, and we don't seem to have a problem in allowing them to do that as well. So I would suggest that this is a good amendment to look at moving forward and allowing the taxpayer dollars to get to where they're most needed.
Okay, I'll ask the committee one more time. Is there objection to the amendment by any committee member? I have an objection. Does the gentleman move?
Yes, sir.
He moves. All in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose the amendment, like sign. All right, I guess I better get a hand count. Everybody in favor of the amendment, please raise your right hand. Lindsay, would you help me count them, please? In favor of the amendment, which is AM 181434, the Graves Amendment. All right, I see 6. Those opposed, raise your right hand. 1, 6. have it 6-6. The chair votes no. All right, other amendments.
The one I presented to you, Mr. Chair, it should be in.
Would whoever's 26, would you let him speak to his amendment first, and then and then
I was
here?
going to move on it.
Are you ready to move on it already? Yeah, that way we can talk about it. Yeah, go ahead, if you would.
I'll move that we adopt the amendment submitted that inserted after the word paragraph on line 15 of page 2.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Now discussion.
If it wouldn't cause too much heartburn if this amendment's adopted, could I put it instead at the end of line 23? It would fit a little bit better. Then it'd be one exception following another exception.
I'll defer to the Legislative Council. That's fine with me.
Mr. Chairman, I so move on Legislative Council advice.
Okay. Any other discussion of the amendment? Is there objection to the amendment? Seeing none, the amendment is adopted. Are there any further amendments to come before the committee on this legislation? See none. 15, yes, sir. Representative Gray.
I just want to make a comment before we vote and let the chairman know that without my amendment, I will not be able to support a bill that allows a private company to hold taxpayer dollars for 12 months.
Okay. Any other comments from members of the committee regarding this legislation? Seeing none, what is the pleasure of the committee? I have a motion by Representative Roberts to pass. Do I hear a second? And a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, raise your right hand. All opposed, raise your right hand. We had somebody added. Did somebody just come in?
No. 7-5.
That's 7-6. It carries, I think. Do that again. All in favor, raise your right hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Opposed? 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. 7, 6. Is that right? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
All right, I've had a request from Chairman Lewis. I think we're going to try to do this. Well, we got Chairman Willard. That everybody's got to go. Which one of y'all thinks you can do yours the fastest? I'll yield to Chairman Lewis. You're in your place. What number are you? You recognize
Number 26. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is House Bill 1129, LC number 187203S. This is the bill known as the Georgia Tourism Development Act. It's been well vetted, and just to remind the members of what this bill attempts to do, it attempts to incentivize major tourist attractions to this state if they can prove that they can attract certain amount of customers and that they can show where they're going to make certain minimum investments in this state. There's only been one major change to the bill since it passed out of the full House last session, and that's on page 6, beginning with line 32, and this was a recommendation from Chairman O'Neill, which states that if a company is approved by the Department of Economic Development and Tourism and the local jurisdiction that an attraction may be located in, if they are approved under this act, the Department of Economic and Development and Tourism may deny them from receiving any other state economic development incentives. Other than that, Mr. Chairman, the bill is in pretty much the same form as it passed the House last time.
Are there any questions for Chairman Lewis on what I consider some very wise legislation for economic development in this state. I don't see any. What's the pleasure of the committee?
Move due pass committee substitute to House Bill 1129.
I have a motion. Do pass committee substitute House Bill 1129. I have a second. I have a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Carries unanimously, and that bill will be in rules hopefully by 5 o'clock today. Thank you, Chairman Lewis. Now, thank you so much for your patience, Chairman Willard. You are recognized for inside baseball, or whatever we call it, arbitration. House Bill.
I would hope you give such kind recognition to my bill as you did the
140.
previous bill.
Yours is a little less sizzle than his had, to be honest with you. But
True it
glad
does.
to have you. Go ahead.
Thank you. This is a bill that we've had last year, passed through the committee. It's been through subcommittee review both years. It's a bill that addresses what will be forthcoming after 2010 when we have the census and the renegotiation of your local option sales tax to those counties that have adopted a local option sales tax called the loss tax. And what we're trying to do is hedge off what the problem we experienced in the past after the census, and trying to have the local governments, the counties and the cities together, sitting down, negotiating this tax, not being able to come to an agreement, having stalemates, problems trying to get the parties to work through, a growing bitterness between the local governments because of this negotiation. And we experienced it back after 2000, 2001. And I refer back to the time that Chairman Royal was heading up the state planning, community affairs, and also, no, Ways and Means, wasn't it? I believe at the time, excuse me. Community affairs, state planning, community affairs, I get it right. Because we both serve the same committee. But the problem was it just caused constant consternation between these local governments. And the stalemate was the threat, having one government over the barrel. If you don't agree, then we'll sit back and do nothing, let the local option sales tax terminate. That was the ultimate atomic bomb, you might call it. We have provided, and I've worked with the cities, the counties' representatives. They're in agreement. We're providing for a means of what we call arbitration, and I use the term loosely as baseball arbitration because it works the same way. That's where the idea came from. If you can't reach an agreement, the two sides will then each prepare their own proposal of what they believe to be the best solution of how to divvy up the money based upon the 9 guidelines that's under the law directing how the money is to be allocated and what factors are to be considered. Once they reach this proposal, there will be a judge from a circuit or county other than the county under consideration as a senior judge to hear this proposal as a hearing by each side presenting it. The judge will not be sitting there to try and find a way to chop the baby in two. In fact, the judge will take one or the other proposal and have that as being the order as to what will be the formula for the next 10 years in the division of the local option sales tax. Now, why and how is that going to work? The same way it does work in this type of arbitration. That is, you find that the parties, once they realize they have to come to a fairness understanding and argue that to in this case, a judge, they're going to finally sit down, I think in most cases, reach their own agreement without having to get to this point. So that is the benefit of it. As I said, we've talked to the, working with the representative of GMA and ACCG, and I have them here today. They can speak for themselves. They are in agreement with this proposal. That is one part of the proposal. The second part, Mr. Chairman, begins in Section 3. As I mentioned, one of the things you've had also as a threat is that a county government could, or a qualified municipality by individual could call for a referendum to terminate the local option sales tax. This has a very onerous effect too, because most of the local governments who've had this in place for years have grown, of course, dependent upon this as a part of their revenue. There's been perhaps cutting back of ad valorem tax. They have their budgets based upon it. In fact, we have one city recently, it's sort of an act of vindictiveness, we'll call it, down in Clayton County, a small city, said, we'll show you, you won't do us what we want, we'll just call for a referendum trying to terminate it. It didn't pass, but it put the county to a great deal of expense for no reason. So what we've built in is some language that says now whenever the governing authority of any county and the governing authorities of qualified municipalities containing more than 1/2 of the aggregate population of all qualified municipalities wish to terminate it, then they can enter into a resolution doing so, and that would then bring about the referendum to terminate. So one government cannot act alone, again, having this leverage, we'll call it. They have to work in concert. Mr. Chairman, those are the major points. I'll be happy to answer any questions that committee members may have. I know everybody's tired.
Committee have any questions or comments? I see none. I have a motion to pass from Representative Mosby and a second from Representative Flood. Further discussion. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Carries unanimously. It'll be in rules. Thank you, sir. You almost shortened that up a little bit, Mr. Chairman. We thank you for that. I just want you to know you were trying.
It's a long day.
All right. Saved maybe the best bill for last while we still have a quorum. Chair recognizes the chairman from the Mitchell County area who has, over the many years of his service in this state, one of his great sources of pride is a wonderful charter school that he has, and he has some very vital legislation in connection with that great institution for the folks in need of education in his county. Chairman Royal, tell us about House Bill 1065, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After that glowing recommendation, why don't you just take a vote on it? House Bill 1065 just simply is permissive legislation which allows a charter school in a county to receive E-LOST or E-SPLOST funds in capital outlay projects.
Well, thank you, and I certainly will accept that motion from Representative Abrams. Do I have a second? Second. A second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the proposition signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. It carries unanimously and will be reported to rules today.
Thank you.
We have for the Martin tax package, House Bill 1244. I'm going to assign that to our income tax subcommittee. We'll let Chairman Martin know that. House Bill 1267, performing arts and amphitheater sales tax exempt. That also will go. We'll go to the sales tax committee. The first one, I hope I said income tax. If I misspoke, 1244 income tax, 1267 sales tax, 1268 also in the sales tax subcommittee. And the chair would recognize a great resource to this committee, Representative Virgil Flood. Could you tell us a little bit about your proposition in House Bill 1264? What number there? 13.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the interest of time, I'll be brief. The Speaker has already mentioned this plan. I guess he had a chance to look at it. But basically, it's an opportunity for comprehensive tax reform. The bill looks at a number of different items. It provides for a restructuring of the income tax brackets, puts in a circuit breaker for property taxes, eliminates the inventory tax, as well as the vehicle tag tax and the sales tax used in energy, and has with it some accompanying revenue-generating opportunities, and so it would be essentially revenue neutral. There is going to be a request for a fiscal note to validate the assumptions in the bill.
It certainly appears from the outset to be a very comprehensive initiative, and I'm very glad that you've brought that. We're going to put that in our tax reform subcommittee, and I look forward to a spirited debate. There may be some very good ideas in there. Chairman Lewis, could you tell us about House Bill 1249, please, sir? And your number is, gotcha.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What this bill attempts to do is to provide an income tax credit incentive for a manufacturer who would manufacture photovoltaic solar energy technology. That again is
Could you say that fast?
Photovoltaic solar technology, and basically what that technology does is it converts solar energy into electricity for a home. And this technology was, I believe, invented and created here at Georgia Tech in Georgia, and they have an option of building a manufacturing facility here, which is their number one choice, and also New Mexico is recruiting them very hard. And this right here is enough incentive that they need to sway them more toward Georgia, so we can attempt to keep them here in Georgia. And I would just ask that we do that, Mr. Chairman.
It's certainly interesting legislation, and we're going to put that in our income tax subcommittee. Chairman Jones or Chairman Knight, we thank you all. Hopefully we'll get some hearings on that rolling very quickly.
Thank you.
And maybe by the end of all those, I'll be able to spell that, whatever that word that you said. I don't think it was designed for Southerners to pronounce it, I can tell you that. So, Chairman Royal, how about House Bill 1259, please, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 1259 provides for income tax credits for clean energy properties. Clean energy property is defined on line 21, starting on line 21, page 1, and it's very lengthy. It goes on down to line 26 on page 2. It also has varying income tax credits, and those are listed on page 4, beginning with line 1 and going on down through line 31 on page 5.
Any questions for the author of that before we assign it to sub? Chairman Roy, we're going to put that in the income tax subcommittee, and hopefully they'll get a hearing on that very soon. Representative Peak, now Chairman Peak, that's true. You've been quiet all day, so I'm not going to take you last. How about telling us about House Bill 1246? What number are you, please, sir? You're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 1246 is really just a little cleanup bill. The job tax credit program, which has been in place for a long time, in the statute had qualifying businesses of manufacturing, warehousing, distribution, processing, research. The broadcasting industry had always been categorized, for whatever reason, in processing, for whatever reason. The SIC codes, which determine those classifications, now have changed, and so this bill has really become necessary to amend the Georgia statute to make sure that broadcasting remains eligible for these job tax credits, which they've been taken all along under the category of processing, but now, as a result of the SIC codes, need to be defined as a separate industry. So it's really just to clean up the purpose of the bills, to make sure the broadcast remains a qualified industry to receive the job tax credits.
Although I have seen broadcasters euthanize politicians and process them very well after that, so yeah. I see why that might have started that way. Thank you for that the presentation, Chairman Peak, and we're going to put that in the Income Tax Subcommittee, and your friend right next to you there, Chairman Knight, can arrange a hearing for you. And as a segue into our last first reader, Chairman Knight, tell us about House Bill 1274, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring before the committee House Bill 1274, which is proposed legislation that's been brought to us by the Georgia Environmental Facilities Authority and Department of Natural Resources, and I'm glad they've done it. Georgia has been very good in the last couple of years with the land conservation program, and this bill seeks to improve on that and make it a more efficient and effective program. The bill basically does 5 things. One, it starts to define a fair market value of qualifying donated real property that is established by a property appraisal, and it's going to tie it back into the IRS specifications. And currently, the fair market value are being determined by the county tax assessors. Second thing is it's providing penalties for the donated property valuation misstatements, which I think is a good thing. We're going to put some penalties in there for gaming our system. It allows for the donation of real property to the federal government to qualify under this program, and that's such if we've got federal land or somebody owns land within the federal forest. It also allows for sales of qualifying real property at less than fair market value to qualify under the program. And currently our law just does not allow for the partial donations of the property. And the last thing it does is it extends the tax credits, or the time period that the taxpayer can carry forth those tax credits, from 5 to 10 years so that they can better utilize those tax credits. Good bill, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Knight. Not only that's a great bill, not just because it was my bill when it first originated, but we are indeed a growing state, and we need every arrow in our quiver about conservation and green space. And basically, this is an opportunity through a tax credit, which is a form of appropriation, to actually allow us to gain green space and conservation easements for about 1/4 of what we would have to otherwise buy them for as a government entity. So, where we have people with a charitable heart and also a need for some federal deductions along with our credit, I think we're going to see some high quality life areas set aside for our children and grandchildren and great grandchildren in the future of some of this beautiful land that we call Georgia, that might otherwise turn into blighted, urbanized or residential areas, and we could maintain the beauty this way. So we look forward to that perfection of that legislation moving forward, and we're going to assign that to which committee? Income Tax Subcommittee. And is there any other business to come before the committee today? Please say no. You guys and gals are terrific. We thank you and stand adjourned.